When Ming was a professional photographer, he kept a photography blog. I read his entire blog front to back. Can you be ready in 30 minutes? Zach is picking up his 5711 right now. So few people have the opportunity to take something that they're really passionate about and make it their life.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wrist Enthusiast Radio. Today, we have James Kong, aka Waitlisted, here, and also the co-founder of Fleming. Is that
COO.
COO of Fleming. So we're going to talk about all of that. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great. Really excited to have James on.
Yeah, and this is our first episode post-Chinese New Year, so happy Chinese New Year, Derek.
Happy Chinese New Year to
And
you
me.
guys. Yeah, and to James.
James.
Come on. They're leaving James out already.
No, actually, just only Derek.
There was like a big they were doing like a thing outside of your store.
Yeah, they were doing the Chinese New Year lunar dance. So they have like the dragon
That's
dance.
what it's called.
Yeah.
Lion dance, I should
It was
say.
cool.
Yeah, so they were doing it outside. I'm surprised they're still doing it because they already did the parade last weekend where they shut down the roads and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, really excited to have James on.
Thank you,
AKA
guys.
Waitlisted. Everyone knows him for
Yeah.
his amazing photos on Instagram, and now you get to see him work in a different area, but now with Fleming, which I'm sure you're going to tell us all
We'll
about
talk
it.
all about that. But before we do that, let's talk about what's on our wrists. And I guess, James, since you are our guest,
Absolutely.
tell us a little bit about what you're wearing.
Sure. So I'm wearing a prototype of the Fleming Series 1 Launch Edition in rose gold. So it's one of three variants we launched with, the others being platinum and tantalum. So each of them have different dials. This one has a sort of hand tremblage
Let's
dial.
see it.
Sure.
Take that.
Pass it around.
Pass it around.
Come on. This is the one I reviewed, right?
Exactly.
This exact one?
It might be that exact one, indeed.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can see your fingerprints still on it.
Yeah.
The movement is great.
Oh, thanks, man.
So how many of those did you make?
So 7 in total will be produced.
Wow.
We launched in March of last year officially as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been coming up on a year now, and we're currently working on our next models. But this was our first.
In between the three, it's what, 40 pieces?
So we're making a total of 41 production pieces. They are divided somewhat idiosyncratically: 7 rose gold, 9 in platinum, and 25 in tantalum.
How did you
Whoa.
decide? And tantalum the most,
They
which
just
is the hardest to work
agreed
with.
that tantalum would be the most sought after. They're like, let's
Exactly.
just focus on that one.
I mean that's
But it's also the
pretty much
hardest to
it.
make.
Yeah. It's I mean it was what we thought. There are a lot of rose gold, a lot of platinum watches out there. Obviously, tantalum is less common. It's a very hard material to work with. And we thought it'd be cool to launch with the most availability in the most difficult case material to work with, which ended up, it was cool, but actually it's ended up taking a lot of time to get the tantalum cases done.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a difficult material to work with. It behaves in a very strange way compared to especially gold, which is very easy to work with. And we have a lot of alternating brushed and polished finishes on our cases. We have lugs that are polished at a downward slope, and all of that has been,
good on you.
credit to our case maker for actually being willing to take on the challenge and to see the project through, because it was
He's getting some
we made their lives very difficult.
I need to become the COO of Fleming.
Yeah, he's like, I need one of these. He's like, I'm switching
all
my-
the time. Are you
He's like,
kidding me?
Ben's like, I'm switching my under $50,000 choice right now. No, I remember you telling me the difficulties you were having with the lugs and how they were like attached.
Exactly. Yeah.
And-
So we actually on the rose gold and the platinum cases, the lugs are soldered to the case, which is a very traditional way of attaching lugs to a case. On the tantalum watch, we had to revise the engineering of the case to have the lugs screwed on, because we tried soldering tantalum and it did not work out very well.
Okay.
But we managed to keep the same finishing, the same geometry, same look in tantalum, which was a a huge accomplishment by our case maker.
Ben, I just realized we're both interviewing 2 independent watchmakers right
Yeah,
now.
look at this.
I think we're like different levels. No, but one thing I remember, I think it was at the Alternative Horological Alliance.
Exactly. Yep.
You guys are working together, you, Ming, and Jay and Shapiro, to make a tantalum bracelet. And I think it was Josh that said that it takes, if you could make 20 stainless steel bracelets with one tool, like you would get half of a tantalum bracelet before you need to replace the tool.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah.
So that's
I remember the first time James showed me a prototype of that, and it was like, what's it called? It was in a restaurant. It was after some event. I forgot what it was, but you had like us and whoever's at the table sign NDAs on a napkin. Before we're allowed to view it, because at that time,
James is a lawyer.
Yeah, no,
and I'm a lawyer too.
He did the right thing. Yeah.
I didn't have to sign the NDAs for the rent. I don't know what happened.
You better learn from it. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? Well, I'm a litigator.
If you need legal advice,
I'm a litigator, and he's a transactional attorney.
2 lawyers as well.
Yeah.
Look at us.
And all of them are allocated.
They are,
41,
for the Series 1 launch edition, they're all allocated. 41 pieces. We won't make the same variants again, so we'll have the next edition will be in the same vein, but a revised design that we're currently working on.
That's super
production.
limited. I feel like you hear limited, it's like some brands like limited to 5,000. It's like, no, we're limited to 7 of these.
Remind me again, what are the prices of the 3 variants?
So our pricing is in Swiss francs. Originally, it was in dollars, and then we realized that was not a great decision when all our suppliers take payment in Swiss francs. But the Tantalum watch is, I think, 45.5 Swiss, which works out to around 50,000 US. The rose gold is 51.5 thousand Swiss, and the platinum is 53,000.
So the tantalum is actually the least expensive in the
exactly.
In the sense?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's actually, in the end, I think our casemaker definitely spent more effort on the tantalum cases than the rose gold and the platinum cases, because we actually, like Craig said, we had to redesign the entire case after they had already made an initial run and tried to solder the lugs, and then we scrapped that, re-engineered the case, and then they produced a whole different run. So there's no way they made money on our cases, which is thank you very much to our case maker. But yeah, no, it was a challenge, and we're very happy we were able to get it done.
Oh, that's awesome.
I learned something very interesting about the prices of precious metals. I heard that gold is more expensive than platinum just to buy, like
right now. Yes,
exactly. Yeah.
Right now it is. Platinum is much harder to work with. Which is, blew my mind.
I mean, look at all the brands that are doing price increases from last year, even the year before. Everything is mostly in gold too.
Yeah. Our material, and we put in orders for our cases going on 3 or 4 years ago now. But I would say ballpark, the 3 gold, platinum, and tantalum were not so different from each other in terms of overall cost. But for gold, a lot more of the cost is in the cost of the materials. Same with platinum, whereas raw tantalum is not actually an expensive material, relatively speaking. But there's so much more involved in actually machining, polishing tantalum, that the overall price is around on par with gold and platinum.
And then for our viewers, like, what is the difference, like, with tantalum? Why is it not used much in the industry? Because I feel like you have a lot of experience to answer this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I would say the way that it's been, and I'm not a material scientist, the way it's been explained to me by our casemaker is that it behaves sort of like bubble gum. Imagine trying to machine bubble gum and to polish bubble gum. So it's not, people say it's a hard material to work with, and sometimes that gets translated into, it's a very hard, physically hard material. That's not actually the case. It's sort of gummy, and that means it's very hard when you're machining it, And that also means that it's very difficult when you're polishing it to keep the shape and to keep, for example, a sharp edge when you're polishing it, because it just behaves very oddly as a material.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that.
And the rejection rate for something in tantalum, especially if you're trying to polish it, is much higher than for gold and platinum.
Wow.
And platinum also is more difficult to work with than gold.
Wow. Wow.
Cool. We'll get into more.
Yeah,
on
I
Fleming.
have like 1,000 more questions. We'll save it after the wrist.
Okay, Ben, what are you wearing?
I am wearing the Echo Neutra Rivanera.
Okay.
I could pass it around. It's definitely not a Fleming, I'll tell you that much. But it's cool. It's a tank style watch, but I like the juxtaposition of it being like, quote unquote dress watch tank, but it's made of grade 5 titanium, which is like so different and out there. It's got a manual movement. It's like 9 millimeters thick.
Nice.
Super thin, $1,300. I like
Very straight edges, like very faceted. And
yes, and there's different sort of finishings on the case, but I feel like for the price, it's pretty cool.
And you got it on a Deluxe strap.
And I got it on a Deluxe strap.
And
The
you
sponsor
know
of the
what,
podcast.
guys? Deluxe sponsors our podcast. We'll put a link to Deluxe. This is a nice strap.
So that's actually Derek's strap. I am going to get a strap for it because I don't love the strap it came with, just to be completely transparent.
What kind of strap? What is the
think
name of
this
this strap?
one is the...
Is it Saffiano?
Yes, I think it's Navy Saffiano. I think that's correct. Navy Saffiano with this like white stitching on the edge.
I love Saffiano. It's like one of my favorites.
Really?
To me, it's like higher. It feels like more expensive
Yeah.
100%.
than like a generic,
Just like a generic calf skin, for example.
calf skin,
Yeah. This one's nice. It has like nice detailing. There's nice texture on the strap.
I love the case texture and the overall
slight
color scheme.
It's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a black one too, but I like the monochromatic.
Are they
gray.
limited or?
No, they're not limited. I think that they're sold out and waiting for more production.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Very nice.
it's cool. Nothing. I mean, it's tank, but it's really nothing. Not like another watch at that price point. I've
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah, no, it
It's
looks
like that
great.
very Art Deco.
Yes. Yeah. I wish it was a little bit smaller, but
Like more.
You want it a little bit small, like the
Yeah.
reverso kind of small, like
Yeah,
last time
yeah,
you were
yeah.
wearing the mid-size.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
that watch.
but the size
Two
looks good on
tank-style
you.
watches in a row.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like it.
nice.
Nice. Well, Derek, you also have a rectangular watch on.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Reverso.
similarities going on. There's rectangular watches.
I also want a
and-
deluxe
and
strap,
lawyers
right?
here. Yeah, I'm wearing the JLC, the Jaeger LeCoultre Reverso Dual Face Medium Classic. That's the full name. I'm wearing it on a gray nubuck strap, which is kind of like a gray suede. Hold on, let me pass it to you before.
There we go.
Deluxe.
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 So I'm wearing it on the Deluxe gray nubuck strap. I love gray, obviously, so we don't have to talk about that again. But I have it on their new deploying clasp, which is really comfortable. It folds on both sides, and it's cool. I
That's
like
awesome.
how it makes the watch really easy to wear.
Derek loves Omega, Seiko Grand Seiko, and
That's
gray
correct.
straps.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Gray
That's
straps
about right.
and
And
Deluxe.
JLC.
And James Com.
And James Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah, this strap's very nice too.
Yeah, it kind of like makes the watch a little more casual because
Yeah.
like the polished edges on the whole watch can be very dressy, especially on an alligator strap. I like making my dress watches a little bit more wearable because there's always that notion you have a dress watch and you can only
I
wear the
agree.
suit.
I agree. I love that dichotomy.
Yeah, like make it more casual. Like it's cool when people are wearing like sweats and then they're wearing like a dress watch and then they
Yep.
made it fit their style.
Yes.
What side of the Duo Face do you wear more often?
I'm back and forth, man. No, but
Darth, Derek, and good Derek, the good side when you're like in a good mood, and then
no, I actually like the black dial side a lot because it has lume on it, and I find that
yeah.
always interesting for a reverso. You don't really see it, especially on like a dressy watch. Some people will debate the reverso is actually a sport watch because of the polo thing, but I think everyone contextualizes it as a dress watch today.
I need a reverso.
Yeah.
me too.
Alrighty. And Craig, what are you wearing on the wrist today?
I am wearing the Gerard Perregaux Laureato 38 millimeter in sage green.
Oh, I want to see that.
It's not mine. I'm reviewing it. I was at one of the PR places, and I took it off the person's wrists.
Wow.
Because I saw this at Geneva Watch Days when I think it was still embargoed, and I was like, that's really nice. And 38 millimeter, it wears even smaller.
I really like the way the
lugs are
L'Oreal feels.
very small. But yeah, that color is super nice. It's very unique, I think. How does it fit?
Oh, it fits amazing. This is exactly the size I would get if I were to get this watch.
Yeah.
And the dial is really cool. It's
How
a
many-
very muted green.
It's
sage
very-
green.
Yeah.
How many 38 millimeters do I have? Just that one? I don't
They
know.
have
they have
they had
a
a
black
copper. They had a
dial.
copper color too,
Oh,
which
right,
I almost
yeah.
brought back both, and I was like, no, I'm just gonna. This one's okay for
It's a
now.
liability.
Yeah, it's super nice. I mean, I like the L'Oreal. I think it's underrated.
It definitely
Um,
is.
I mean, it's like actually from that era. I think it's released in 1976. So,
I believe it.
Yeah.
the original L'Oreal. So it's not like a modern take on.
Next year would be what, 50 years? Or no, that's this year.
I thought it's next year.
Maybe next
Maybe
year.
next year.
Maybe next year.
So
50 years.
There's a lot of anniversaries going on this year for
Yeah.
Watches and Wonders.
Yeah.
and big
Yeah.
ones like
Yeah.
I think
AP.
Yeah, AP has like what 270 or
No,
250.
we went through this, Derek.
I know, we did this last time. That was like too long.
I don't remember.
270 is not an anniversary.
I'm not going through that
60
again.
years is not an anniversary.
there were too many. Oh, Zenith is a big one this year.
Oh yeah.
60 years.
Rolex had something with the GMT Master 2, or is that am I mistaking something?
I don't know. That was my prediction.
Also, wait, is AP actually 270 years? That does not feel right.
no. I think
No.
that's that's Vastron.
Forget.
That is so many years.
That's
I think
so
about
many
that,
years.
it's so
I think it's
mad.
150 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
something like
which
that.
is a real,
Even-
which is a real one. I think when you
That's
start
a
like doing
lot.
like their brands are like, oh, it's our 73rd 73rd anniversary, and I'm like, it's like
it's actually Fleming and Wren's first anniversary. So.
yeah, big stuff happening.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've done our wrist check, today we're talking with James, as you've seen him already. So James and I first met. We were both still, I think, practicing
We're
as
both
lawyers, which we both are no longer practicing, but we had that in common. And James was photographing watches. His Instagram is at waitlisted, a play on, I think, the waitlist
Yes.
for the watch brands, not like waitlisted in like for college or
Or a wait list for a Fleming.
Yeah.
for
Yes.
Fleming. And James is, to me, I think one of, if not the best photographer in the watch industry. But he eventually went full time working with Fleming. He still does photography. He's doing some videography now too.
Yeah.
So I thought that we would start with James talking about how he got into watches, how he got into the watch industry, and then maybe give us some advice on photography, and then get into Fleming, which was
Yeah, we're gonna just pick your brain this entire episode.
So I
Absolutely.
mean, talk about how you got into watches in the first place.
Yeah, I actually don't have a neat sort of origin story for how I got into watches, and you can probably tell from, if you know me, but I'm the kind of personality where if I get into something, I just become like obsessed, and that happened with watches, with photography. It also happened with French, which I end up using a lot now that I work in the watch industry. But
Gracias.
Is that all you know, Derek?
I know.
Bonjour.
I know Jaeger Lecote
And
I remember, so I started seriously considering buying watches when I would say a little over a decade ago.
Okay.
And that happened to coincide with the year I paid off my law school loans.
Yep.
Love that.
Correlated.
Well, and also like James and I both worked at big firms out of law school, so you start to get some disposable income. So
Exactly.
then once you go into the watch
Right.
industry, you don't have the disposable income anymore.
Exactly.
You just use the old income.
You still have it.
But yeah, this was around 2013, 2014 when I finally hit it's a big moment when you hit like zero net worth, because that means you finally have paid off your debt. And that was around the time I seriously started to look at watches. There were some early watches that I was obsessed with. I remember I spent like 6 months looking at pictures of an IWC online,
Which
and
one?
it was some Portugueser.
Okay.
And this was before, and I hadn't spent a lot of time at watch boutiques, or I didn't know any other watch people, and I happened to have a very small wrist. But for whatever reason, I just got obsessed with this IWC, and I had never tried it on, seen it in person, but like every day I would be at work, like looking at pictures of this watch online. And then like 6 months in, I finally like worked up the courage to walk into the IWC boutique in Midtown. That was like my first time in a watch boutique. And I tried it on. Turns out it was way too big for me. But that
So
was
sad.
Like, I can't believe
And
the
then
46
and then it could have gone the other way, and
Right.
I never tried
Exactly.
another watch again.
Right.
And you're still working as a lawyer.
Exactly. And then you know, it could have gone that way, but it went the opposite way, where I just fell deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. For a long time, I would say watches were sort of like a solitary hobby for me. I didn't really, you know, I wasn't going to events. I wasn't hanging out with other watch people. You know, at most I'd spend a lot of my time reading the forums that were still pretty active back then, although now most of that conversation has shifted to Instagram or TikTok or other social media. But back then it was mostly forums. And so I'd spend a lot of time reading watch forums. And then I would say in 2018, that was when I started going to events. Hodinkee, that coincided. So I was living in New York this whole time. This coincided really with sort of the rise of Hodinkee. And at the time they were hosting a lot of events in person. And, you know, I always thought like, oh, you know, I'm too intimidated to go. Everyone's going to be super knowledgeable. Everyone's going to look down on me. And then I went to like my first watch event and everyone was super nice. I've met people that I still keep in touch with, you know, 7 years later. And at that point I was like addicted. Like I just like all my social life, I was going to watch events. While I was a lawyer, I would spend all my time at work thinking about watches. I would, you know, be sitting at my desk daydreaming, just like looking at my wrist.
You need to rewind a second.
Sure.
Though. After you didn't get that IWC,
Yeah.
what did you get something else? I want to know like
okay.
what you were wearing to these
Yeah.
Hodinkee events.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like a lot of kids who grew up in the 90s, I had Seikos, Casios. I bought a Victorinox, like Swiss Army watch in high school. That was like the first watch I bought with like my own money.
Yeah.
And then I went through a long period where, you know, from like college until like I started making money, that I didn't really wear a watch.
Okay.
And then after the IWC thing, I kind of like reset and spent a lot more time reading about watches, and I bought a Seiko 5.
Okay.
Nice.
You know, everyone's like favorite, like kind of like Reddit, you know, forum starter watch.
Okay.
And I still have that watch.
Oh, cool.
And then I bought a Hublot. I bought a 2017. I bought my first Royal Oak from AP.
Nice.
And
That's so casual. That's
Yeah.
the jump is crazy.
Like as James is talking, I'm like realizing so much of like, I don't mean to cut you off, but like I realized that you've also influenced me in a lot of ways, because
Yeah.
I actually just thought about the first time I met you,
Yeah.
and it was at a Hodinkee event,
Yeah.
and I think it was 2018. It was
Yeah.
definitely pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And I don't think we knew each other, but I knew of you, and you had the Constantine
Chaikin Joker, exactly.
the Joker, and
Yep.
you it was the perpetual calendar party.
Yep,
In the Lower
that's
East
right,
Side.
that's right.
And I
That
think you
was-
were talking to Cole Pennington and
That's
showing
right.
him your watch.
That's right.
Like
That's right.
I saw you across the room, but I don't think we interacted because we didn't
Yes.
really know each other. But I remember that
Yes.
exact moment. That was the
Yeah.
first time I saw waitlisted in real
Yeah,
life.
yeah. That was
I was intimidated. I was like,
That's funny.
Waitlisted.
that was 2020, which was
was
really
2020.
before I even like got into photography.
Wow.
This was like right when I opened my Instagram account in 2019.
Okay.
You should scroll back and see the difference between
Yeah,
those
you can
photos
kind of
and-
see like my entire evolution from when I like first, you know, didn't know anything about photography at the beginning to how I ended up like obsessed with photography.
Are you more obsessed with photography or watches?
I would say both.
Okay.
You know, they're
You can't
they're
just-
they're
they're
intertwined for me,
they're
right?
two
Like
yourselves,
I mean, I had no photography background before I got into watch photography. But I opened my Instagram account in 2019 because by this time I was going to a lot of events, and I was never a social media person. I had my personal Instagram account for like 7 years, and like I had like 50 followers, just like my friends from high school and whatever. But everyone who I met at events would be like, "Oh, what's your Instagram? What's your Instagram?" I'm like, I don't really use Instagram. And then at some point I was like, I should probably make an Instagram, for watches. And then I still remember the day when I like made that decision. I sat down for like 2 hours and tried every single sort of like watch related pun you can think of for my Instagram name.
Yeah, let's hear that.
And
what was your top choice?
Well, waitlisted, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean?
Apparently, it took 2 hours to get to that.
But like it's even by then, like Instagram had been around for like eight or 9 years, and it felt like every single name that was like an actual word was taken.
Yeah.
And I grew up on the internet, so I always thought it'd be cool to have like a cool username, and I wanted like a proper, like something catchy, like an actual word. And I spent like 2 hours trying every single thing I could think of. Everything was taken. And then like waitlisted pop into my head. And I was like, like screw it, I'll try it. And then it went through, and I was like, what the? And by that point I was like, oh my God, like I actually have a cool Instagram account name. Like I have to make something of it.
It's like meta because you only know like the feeling of being waitlisted if you've been waitlisted.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's not directly like it doesn't say the word watch in it, which I really like.
Right.
It's very like undertone.
Right. And it only got more and more relevant as the following years when the market went crazy. But anyway, this was before I was even into photography, and then it was maybe 6 months after that, right before COVID, that I had my account for a while, 6 months by then, and I was just taking pictures with my iPhone. I was like, like maybe I'll like buy a camera and try to like learn to take some nice photos. And then COVID happened. And that was sort of the catalyst for everything that happened afterward, where, suddenly I was still a lawyer back then, working at a big firm. Like in 1 week, we went from being in the office to working from home. I was living in New York, which was like at that time sort of like the epicenter, right? Mm-hmm. And I have a New York-sized apartment, which is to say it's very small. And I didn't really have, I was like, if I'm just sitting here working, on my computer all day, like I'll go crazy. And I was like, well, I have a camera that I just happened to buy, and I had a pile of watches in my collection. And I was like, it'd be cool to, try to properly learn to take some nice photos of my watches.
And BH Photo down the street.
Yeah. So I also happen to live a 5-minute walk away from B&H Photo, which was very dangerous. Very dangerous when I got into photography, because I think it was like, for whatever reason, considered like an essential business. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't closed for very long. And this was when I was getting into photography. So like every day I'd like learn about a new piece of gear that, I supposedly needed, and I would order it and walk the 5 minutes to B&H and like, pick it up in my face mask, and then go home and, try to implement the whatever gear I picked up. And at the beginning I had no idea what I was doing. You can scroll back to my Instagram from 2019 to when there were iPhone photos, and 2020 when they're just, like the first camera photos. What
camera were you shooting on back then?
Yeah, so I bought a Leica Q2
as a first camera. You go big on like everything.
Exactly.
Hugo as a second watch, Leica as a first camera.
No, but it was funny because it's the Leica Q2, which I still have. 6 years later, is a absolutely fantastic camera. But it is, and I learned this only like sometime in, like completely unsuitable to like studio type watch photography. It's nice for like kind of like, going to events, taking pictures of people or taking pictures of wrists. But I was really getting into like the sort of studio style when, the watch is the subject. It's probably not a wrist shot. And for that kind of photography, you really want a camera with a longer lens, and the 28 millimeter fixed lens on the Q2 is quite short, which means the camera has to be very close to the watch in order for the watch to fill most of the frame. And what that also means is you can see this when you try to take like iPhone wrist shots. When the camera is too close to the watch becomes, you get perspective distortion, which is to say that things closer to the camera appear much larger relative to the background. So that's why so many iPhone wrist shots, the watch looks really big.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you'll put a 40mm watch, and in person you're like, it looks fine, and you take a picture, you post online, and everyone tells you
Like
you got
wrist.
puny wrists. But it's actually because of distortion as well.
Exactly.
You actually have puny wrists.
No, I have a normal. Actually, we have the same wrist size.
We do?
Yeah, we all swapped watches, and we didn't have to adjust the link.
Okay.
Yeah. So, to that point with the iPhone, like, the 20, because the iPhone native camera, the One X, is about 28mm.
24, yeah.
That's 24,
Yep.
so it's really close. And like I tell people, like if you want to shoot a wrist shot, like zoom into 2, where it's around 48mm.
Right.
Because it'll create
Exactly.
a more natural
Exactly.
look
Yeah,
of
yeah.
how your eye looks at it.
It'll also force you to put the phone a bit further back from your wrist, which
Yeah.
makes the size a lot more natural looking.
Yeah.
It's funny because I like on my Fuji with like my 80mm lens.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that looks the best,
Right.
but I can't do like wrist shots. 'cause I'm,
Exactly.
like,
Can't do wrist
like
shots.
this.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the worst is I noticed on the phone is the macro lens, because it
Yeah.
automatically changes to macro, and
Yeah.
that's when you get the
Yeah,
grainy-
that's a trap.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a trap.
Don't use a macro. Yeah,
I've
do not
actually
use a macro.
I've actually talked to a lot of people about this, because people are like, "Oh, I bought the iPhone 16, but it sucks for watch photos because it always switches to the macro lens and the quality is terrible."
Yeah.
Which is true, because what happened was maybe like the iPhone 12 and before, there wasn't the macro lens.
Yeah.
And Apple designed the main lens to be able to focus closer because there wasn't a macro lens. And a lot of people kind of kept the habit of using the main lens, but once Apple added the ultra-wide macro lens, they optimized the main lens so that the minimum focus distance was a bit further away, and everything closer than a certain distance, the iPhone would automatically switch to the ultra-wide macro. And what's better to do actually is to just disable the ultra-wide switching, which I do, and then move the iPhone back.
Yeah.
And use the main camera, because that's the camera that gives you the best results. And I'd rather use the main camera and then crop into the picture digitally than have it switch directly to the ultra wide, because with the ultra wide you're gonna have to put the iPhone really close. You're gonna get distortion. The edges are gonna look weird.
it's grainy too.
It's grainy.
It's so
It's
grainy,
not.
yeah.
It's not great in low light.
Yeah, I remember when it was Watches and Wonders a few years ago. iPhone 13 came out, iPhone 13 Pro with macro lens. I was like, I'm gonna buy the phone, bring it with me. Luckily, I actually brought my Sony camera with me, but I was thinking, if I don't have time to pull out my camera, I'll use my phone. And then I remember looking at everything, like, everything looks so shitty. Like, why did I spend $1,000 on the new phone?
I was at LVMH Watch Week, and I was sitting next to Zach Blass, and he was filming on his. I do like a lot of my like video on my phone at these events, because like getting the camera in the right settings for video and everything at the right lighting, it's just hard in the iPhone.
Yeah.
I feel like with 4K 60 frames per second is good.
Yep.
He was saying you put it in 0.9.
Oh, it goes wider.
And then if you bring it close, like you can like on the wrist, it gets a little bit distorted. But if you're like bringing it close, it will like allow you to like bring it close and far away and get really detailed close.
I don't know if I
Any-
agree. See,
I-
James
yeah,
and I looked
anything-
at
James is like, no.
James and I looked at each other right away and we're like, no, that's
Anything
not how you do it.
that is less than 1x is going to use the ultra wide.
Yeah, because you'll notice once you go, every time, like I always send you guys photos of inside the studio, like, hey, look at my
Yeah,
setup.
yeah.
But I can't move back, so
you make it 5.
5.5,
Yeah, and it looks
and then
like
everything
cute.
just gets
Yeah,
like distorted.
Well, that's what they do when you're like touring, when they're touring or like taking photos
Apartments.
of apartments. And you're like,
Apartments,
oh,
yeah.
this looks huge, and you get there and it's like
Exactly.
this is tiny.
Right.
The size,
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you still shoot on Leica. I'm sure you have
No.
multiple cameras now. Whoa.
No.
Okay, tell us.
I shot on Leica for about less than a year, actually. And this was when I was just learning photography. And then once I learned enough, I was like, oh, this is actually, I mean, it's a great camera, but it's always about having the right tool for the job. And it
Yeah.
was just not the right tool for the job. And there was a while where I was shooting on a Leica rangefinder. I was shooting watch photos on a Leica rangefinder, which is even more not the right tool for the job. But I'll give a shout out to Ming Thane, who's the founder of Ming Watches, who had a long career as a top level professional watch photographer before he got into the business of actually making watches. He shot on Nikon at the time, and I was like, well, like if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. And I bought a couple Nikon cameras, and I've almost all of my professional work is shot on Nikon.
Wow. I have a question for you, because I bought a Fuji first, and then I bought a Leica Q2.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to use Leica all the time, and I did at fairs and stuff, but now I normally use my Fuji. Even when I go to fairs, I'd rather bring
one camera that can
a few different lenses and stuff. So I kind of agree with you. My Leica just kind of sits now on my shelf as background for my videos.
Right. That's a pretty looking camera.
It is a pretty looking camera. Yeah, and, well, I got it used from Bilal actually, so I paid $3 something. But still, that's still expensive.
Do you have any other cameras he's looking off?
He's like the biggest Leica guy, and he takes amazing photos.
That doesn't make me feel so bad.
Bilal's a fantastic photographer.
Yeah, he's great, and I'm like, why can't I do these photos with this Leica that Bilal can? So Bilal, he can do crazy stuff with
shout out Bilal. He told me recently, he messaged me, he's like, oh, I'm from Queens, by the way. He's like, next time I come back home to visit, I'll come stop by your store. I'm like,
I'll come on the pod next time.
Yeah, I'll just come on a pod next time.
We talked about it before, but so I have a Fuji, which I like, but it's not full frame, it's crop sensor. And I've been thinking about, Sony's been teasing the A7 IV or V. It's like the
A7 III, A7
A7 IV, because A7 IV,
Yeah, so I've been thinking about moving over. What do you have?
I can give you all the input on Sony, and then I'm interested to hear what yours is.
Let's hear.
Look, I don't. I've never shot Sony, so I am not super familiar with the system. But in terms of crop sensor versus full frame, which is a question that comes up a lot, I would say for 99% of people aren't going to be able to tell.
Yeah.
2, when you post it on Instagram, it's 99.9% of cases, it's going to look the same as a full frame photo.
Yeah.
But at the margins, I would say there is a bit of a quality difference between full frame and APS-C, where you have, maybe the color gradations are a little smoother, you get better, you get deeper, or I guess that's the wrong way to say it, but you get depth of field that's shallower because of the relation between how far with a bigger sensor, usually you're putting your camera closer to the subject, and that for perspective reasons causes the bokeh or blurriness to behave a certain way, and I think some people like that.
The way I chime in, because actually the way we're shooting this podcast is all on Sony cameras.
What cameras do you have? Can you?
So we'll start from your guys' angle. So where Craig and James is sitting, that's shooting on my Sony A7C, which is the first time they used the A7 body. Sorry, it's the full frame camera, but they used the A600 series, which is the crop sensor body. So it was a more compact full frame camera. It was the first of its kind. There's a newer version now, but Sony cameras, a lot of their quality in photo and video hold up really well.
Yeah.
The main angle that we're shooting, where it shows all of us here, that's actually, this one right here in the middle. That's actually Ben's camera that I bought from him. And that's the A6400. So that's the APS-C. That's a crop sensor. The main difference, James gave a really great analysis, but the way I explain it is on the full frame you get more light, so you have better low light images. So just imagine you go to a watch event and it's dark, and you have a crop sensor, you're gonna have to increase the ISO a lot, which can create more noise, all this stuff. But the full frame can handle that a lot better. And then finally, the camera that Ben and I are facing, this is my new camera. It's also a crop sensor, but this is the Sony FX3. actually, sorry, FX30, which was James and I were talking. I was like, this was used in that movie, The Creator. They filmed the entire movie on this camera. It's a cinema camera.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
I'm gonna give a shout out to Loomshot Eric, who's a friend of many of ours here. But I was asking him for a lot of advice on shooting, and he was like, you should get a cinema camera. I'm like, why do I need a cinema camera? Can't I just buy another crop sensor? Because the main thing with crop sensors too is that they're usually cheaper, and also the lenses are cheaper. So you can still get a lot of the same quality. It's just going to be, it's not going to be as expensive.
And you have it facing you because you want that good cinema.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also because I need to monitor what's going on over there. But it's the first time I'm actually using it. So the funny thing is, like, despite having all these really high-tech camera equipment, so like 2 days ago, I was about to film a short, for my own page. And then
Just did it on your phone.
I took the DJI Pocket 3. I was like, okay, I got this new cinema camera.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, now I got to go downstairs and film. Like, well, I need a tripod. I need a microphone.
Yeah.
I need this, that. I was
hate the
I'm just going to do my
distortion.
DJI Pocket 3 and just film it there.
I hate the distortion on that.
Yeah, because the lens is very wide.
Yeah.
So everything you use has a trade-off. I would say
no, of
you just
course.
kind of like have to look at your tool, what's best for the situation. And a lot of the times, like, Ben is a great example of using your iPhone and still getting amazing results, because sometimes the story is more important than how you're shooting.
Absolutely.
And
of
I'm
course.
sure as everyone creates content, you understand that point
Absolutely.
there.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Content is always king.
Okay, so
As they
we're
say.
talking about photography. What would your, like, for someone that wants to get into photography, I mean, more specifically for watch photography, how do you do it? Like, what should they get? What's important? Just give some advice, I guess.
Sure.
That's very wide, very
I'm
general
not.
question.
I always tell people, like, I do things a certain way. I learned a certain way. I can tell you what I did, but I have no. I can't guarantee that it's the best or the quickest way to do it. But basically, for me, it was really, I had a lot of time at home because of COVID, and I just like dove into it. Like, I spent like 10 hours a day taking photos of watches. At the beginning, I had no idea what I was doing. I would just literally take like hundreds and hundreds of photos of the same photo every day until I got to one that I thought was like decent. And then I would post that on Instagram, and then I would go, okay, that was like what I did today. What can I learn for tomorrow? And that was like my overarching philosophy was, well, I don't know anything right now, but as long as I learn something every day and try to improve something every day, even if it's something that no one's going to notice, no one's going to care about, at some point I'll get to a stage where I actually know what I'm doing. And luckily for me, it worked out. But there's really no substitute for practice. But you kind of have to practice in a way, you can take thousands and thousands of photos and not really improve. It's better to take fewer photos and really think about what you're doing, what you like, what you don't like. If you get a photo that you like, then like really try to think like, okay, what did I like about it? And what did I do so that the photo turned out this way? And then try to integrate that into what you do in the future and add on top of that. I never took like any formal courses or anything, but I did spend a lot of time reading. So when Ming was a professional photographer, he kept a photography blog, which
I remember reading it.
Yeah. Which he has a whole series on watch photography, but the majority of the articles, of which there are hundreds, are just on like every single aspect of photography imaginable, like light, composition, philosophy. And when I was learning, I read his entire blog front to back like several times.
That's crazy.
And that was sort of how I learned alongside actually trying to take photos. It is useful to have an actual camera because, with your phone, you can take good photos with a phone, but the problem is you don't really have a sense of how different fundamental photography variables actually change the picture.
Yeah.
And what cameras allow you to do is they allow you to control ISO and shutter speed and aperture, and those are sort of the foundational building blocks to how photos are made. Because all photos are they're just a capture of light, right? That's what photography is, capturing light. and those three variables are sort of the foundation to how a photo is made. And like you said earlier, everything in photography is a trade-off. And so a lot of sort of like the fundamental learning is sort of internalizing what the different variables are that make a photo and what the different trade-offs there are and how to make those trade-offs in different situations. Because when I'm shooting at home in my like studio setup versus when I'm, when I was photographing a lot for Hodinkee, I was, you're like in a conference room or in an auction preview, you don't have a lot of time to set up.
Yeah.
The trade-offs you make depending on what environment you're in can be completely different.
Yeah.
And a lot of that depends on, having a good understanding of like, what are the trade-offs between aperture, right? Like you open up your aperture, you get more light, but the picture is blurrier.
Yeah.
Or you vary the shutter speed so that if the shutter speed is very short, the picture is crispier, but then you get less light. Or ISO, where if you don't have any artificial light, you have to jack up the ISO, and then you get more noise because you amplify the signal, you also amplify the noise. So a lot of that is sort of like you develop sort of like a mental calculator in your brain of like, okay, these are the things that are within my control, and this is how I control them given whatever situation I'm in.
Yeah.
I remember, I think we first met, was it at a Ulysse Nardin event? Was that the event?
I don't even remember.
The one like at the Equinox Hotel or whatever?
Maybe.
That might, and
Maybe.
then we had lunch, and I like brought my camera, and he's like explaining all of this to me. And I'm like, oh my god! I was like, I'm never gonna get this.
Yeah, I can't just point and shoot.
The crazy thing, I just went through your Instagram because you were saying like, go look at my old iPhone photos, and you could see the difference. But it's so crazy how quickly, like you're saying, 10 hours a day. Like it's not like April of 2020.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, he's incredible.
Yeah. Right. I was obsessed.
You have a little bit of an obsessive personality.
Right, exactly.
You kind of have to.
For sure.
Okay, so tell us, unless there's more questions on the
I'm sure it'll come up naturally, but I don't have off the top of my head.
Tell us how you went from taking photos of watches, and I know that you as you said, you did work for Hodinkee, you did work for some of the auction houses. You've just done work for brands. MB&F, I've seen your photos. All these different brands. They always reach out to James, and whenever someone says like,
so one thing I want to cut in is that James has a style that everyone knows as the waitlisted style.
Yes.
And I'll describe it. I'll describe it to you because this is how I think of it. The waitlisted style is the like when you look at it on your phone, the watch is facing you, more or less. But the way it's actually shot is maybe like on its side. And you get to kind of see the curvature of like where the lugs are, and you get to see all these details. And he does something I still don't understand how to do today, which is like you're able to I forgot the exact term. You're gonna probably tell me. It's like when you stitch together all the pixels to make a better image.
Oh, it's
focus stacking.
Focus stacking, which I still don't know how to do, but he does that.
Sometimes, sometimes.
Whereas when you'll notice it when you get like you'll see everything is crazy in focus.
My old editor-in-chief, when I first started getting into photography, anytime I'd be like, oh, I want to do photos like this, he would just be like, it's photo stacked. It's photo stacked. Everything was just photo stacked. That was his answer to everything, which some are, but you can still get a very crispy shot without.
Yeah, there are a couple ways of doing it. One is focus stacking, which very simply is you know how you take a photo of someone and maybe their face is in focus, but the background is blurry. Yeah. It's the same with watches, right? And it's actually amplified with watches because often you're shooting very close with long lenses, and that makes the depth of field, which is the sort of, you think of it as the slice of the photo that's in focus, and it becomes very thin when you're shooting small objects close up with long lenses. And what you do is, there are a few different ways of doing it, but basically you take photos of all of those slices from front to back. Either you're varying the focus on the lens, or you're physically moving the camera on a rail, which is I do both depending on what lens I'm using. And then you take all of those photos that have a different slice of the watch in focus, and then you bring them into software, and the software analyzes all the photos, figures out for each photo which part of the watch is in focus, and then it stitches everything together. And so you get one shot that is the entire subject or whatever you want in focus from front to back. There are issues with focus stacking. One, it's sort of a pain to do, but two, depending on your settings, how many photos you're taking, often they're like stacking artifacts because software isn't perfect. So you'll get like random places that are like blurry and random places that are in focus, or it'll take the wrong part of the wrong photo and make it in focus. And so that's something that, you know, is very common to do in like high-end commercial product photography, but also comes with its own set of workflow challenges.
I remember I tried photo stacking very early on in my photography days of watches, and one of the things when the watch was running, I'd get the second hand would move like all around, and I'm like, oh my god, it's like you can't have the watch. I'd have to like wait till the watch stopped running to get a good photo stack.
The trippiest is if you take a focus stack of a movement that's running and you stack all the pictures together, the balance wheel will become like one kind of like almost like schizophrenic, like little like wheel where you have like a million spokes. But the other way of getting everything in focus is I also shoot often with what's called a tilt shift lens, which is sort of a niche lens, especially for you know, it's used sometimes in architecture. If you've ever seen those photos that have like a miniature effect where it's like a cityscape, but then like maybe a car looks like a mini car and like everything like above and below it is blurry. Those are done with tilt shift lenses. And what a tilt shift lens is you look at the lens. Normal lenses are straight, which means that the plane of focus, which is the slice of the photo that's in focus, is directly parallel to the camera sensor. So whatever direction the camera's facing, the plane of focus is going to be directly parallel for a normal lens. And what a tilt shift lens does is you literally tilt the entire like front assembly of the lens. Like there's a part of the lens that can literally, you can like, it'll be crooked. And through some optical principle, that actually entirely shifts the plane of focus. And so you can tilt the plane of focus to match the angle of your watch. So for example, if your watch is angled, a lot of my photos are shot with the watch slightly angled away from the lens because I like getting sort of that depth, that you get a better sense of the case geometry. And what that means is I'll tilt the lens to match the plane of focus to the tilt of the watch. And that'll allow me to, in one shot, get all of the dial in focus without having to deal with focus stacking.
Wow. Oh, so that's like a, I don't want to say a workaround, but it's like another way to do what you're doing.
Exactly. It's sort of niche, and it's also not the best technique if you don't have a tripod. Also, I mean, focus stacking, you need a tripod as well, but without a tripod, you can handhold a long tilt shift lens, but it's, you know, I used to bring a tilt shift lens when I shot on location.
How long is it?
Mine, the one I use the most often is 135 millimeters.
So
it's
it's
like really.
And so what that means is, you know, any kind of like jitter of my hand causes the picture to shift wildly, and you know, I can focus, and then if I breathe during,
I'm gonna pull out my 80 millimeter lens for comparison. Because this is a big lens.
But no, that's crazy. Thanks so much for sharing thanks so much for sharing all the details on how you shoot.
Absolutely.
Like, it's so awesome to hear this, and like I'm sure people who are listening who are into cameras, even if you just like heard of how to shoot mirrorless or DSLR, you'll kind of understand the principle James is talking about. And it's nice too, because like James is sharing it with us knowledge, but like it's not like we can just go out and grab the equipment and know what to do right away. There's still like so much technique and experience that James has to make it work. And I kind of want to segue like into watches.
Well, I want to give him one more chance to.
All right.
To one more chance to rant about something.
Sure.
James is a big. Yeah, because I know what James thinks about this. James hates front on photography of watches, which is like when you go to like a website of the brand and you see like the brand's watch. It's just like a straight on flat image of a watch.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
James doesn't like that. And with Fleming, it's kind of like
Yeah.
So
yeah,
James,
exactly.
that.
So
See it
James
now.
never likes
Yeah,
my photos on Instagram.
No, so in sort of, and I don't know where this term comes from, but in watch industry parlance, they're referred to as soldier shots.
Yep.
And I remember when the first brand that ever like reached out to me and asked if they could hire me to shoot their watch, they said we need like X number of soldier shots, and this was like early on. I had no idea what a soldier shot was. I remember trying to like frantically like Google soldier shot,
and we'll put some
as you can imagine, I did not get any relevant search results. And I had to actually had to ask Ming, and basically soldier shots are kind of like the industry, you know, what you think of when you go on a website and the watch is like standing up. And it's the strap is fastened and it's absolutely dead on. And I've never liked that kind of shot because one, they're a pain to shoot, but also you don't get any sense of depth, dimensionality, what the crystal is shaped like, how the watch might actually wear on the wrist, because, you know, like in some sense, yeah, like, you know, watches. You do look at watches straight on, but for the majority of the time that a watch lives on your wrist, you're not staring dead on at the watch, right? You're always looking at it from some sort of angle. And the watches I enjoy the most are the ones that are interesting from a side view, an oblique view, and all that is lost when you're just looking at the watch dead on.
Yeah.
And so I've you know, when we launched our brand, our PR folks, who we love, actually told us like you have to include soldier shots in your pack because press is going to expect it. And I, you know, like we caved and I had to shoot a few soldier shots just included in our press pack. But it's, you know, if you look at my Instagram, you'll be able to tell that I don't favor that kind of shot. I just think it does sort of a disservice to the watch.
Yeah. So the way, well, again, that's pretty funny because that's like
I just needed to give him an outlet to change the industry standard.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wish it could be like that where we would have more interesting wrist shots, but we do get those from everyone who's a creator, like shooting their own photos of watches. Yeah.
Yep.
That's where you're getting those kind of interesting shots.
But see, for example, when he saw that IWC in that soldier shot, he didn't get any of like the depth of it or how big the watch was, and then he went in and it didn't even fit him.
Exactly.
So, so I'm sure like if some people are not familiar with James or his work, he mentioned Hodinkee. But the other one that I'm sure everyone will know if I mention this is that James was like the exclusive photographer for Zach Attack's Patek Philippe.
That's right.
Tiffany, because when that article came out, it was the most, what was it called? The highest bid watch.
Yeah.
That was James.
No
James shot all those photos.
He told the story about how you shot that photo.
Exactly.
If you want to.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
tell us about that.
That was great. So this was I'd been shooting for Hodinkee for about 3 months, and this was all when I was a lawyer, right? Like I had this was getting to the point where I had like this other life where I was like, you know, working in the watch industry, going to events, shooting for Hodinkee or other brands, but not telling anyone at work. But in December of 2021, Hodinkee hired me to shoot a photo report of the Philips auction. And that was the auction where they auctioned the Tiffany, the Tiffany 5711 with Tiffany dial. The first example came with something special. And I did the photo report when this guy, who I later met, Zach, walked into the room like 20 minutes late, bid on the watch, didn't actually end up winning at the time. And then we ended up as a group, me, Logan Baker, who was the editor I worked with on the story, and a very good friend of mine, and a couple people from Philips, and Zach ended up going out to lunch together after Zach had, quote unquote, lost the lot. And that was when I properly met Zach. We ended up keeping in touch. A few weeks after that, he was like, "Oh, I have something to tell you," and he revealed that, a story later told in the Hodinkee article, that the winning bidder of that watch had backed out, and because Zach had been and still is a longtime Patek collector, he's in his 30s but has been collecting for a very long time. They offered him the watch, and he decided to buy it. And Zach knew Ben from Hodinkee, knew Logan, knew me, and Hodinkee wanted to do a story on it. And so I knew there was a story coming. I didn't know what form it would take. And then one day in January, so about a month after the auction, Logan calls me up. It's like 5:30 p.m. I was still working as a lawyer at my day job, and Logan's like, "Where are you right now?" I was like, I'm at home. I was working at home. And he was like, "Can you be ready in 30 minutes?" And I was like, "Sure." And he was like, "Zach is picking up his 5711 right now. We want to do a story. Can I interview him at your place while you shoot the watch?" And I was like, "Yeah."
He's like, "Great, I already told him to show up."
And I was like, and I literally like scrambled to like finish up my work and like tidy up my apartment, set up my lights. And like 30 minutes in, and Zach had a dinner that night, if I recall correctly. So he was like, he had like 30 minutes at my apartment while Logan interviewed him, and I photographed this watch that he had just paid $6.5 million for.
Shit.
And like kind of like I was like, it was.
Were you scared touching it?
A little bit. I mean, my adrenaline was like going, like like my heart was pounding.
Did you drop it at all?
Luckily, I did not drop it. And we spent the evening. I retouched the photos while Logan sat in my apartment. We Uber Eats McDonald's while he wrote the story.
The dichotomy, that's crazy.
And and the story went up that night, and it like blew up, right? It was like, you can imagine like hundreds of comments. It was like, for a while, it was like Hodinkee's like biggest story of the year. Until the moon swatch, I believe. And I ended up becoming friends with Zach, spent a lot of time with him that year while he was living in New York. So it was a very, it was a very cool thing. And it was like one of those things where it probably was like a step on the way to me deciding to leave my lawyer career behind, to go full time into watches, because I was like, this is what really gets me going, right? Like it was what I was passionate about. Like, I loved kind of the adrenaline aspect, and to do cool things and take photos, and that was long before I actually like considered it. But I think it definitely played a part in my eventually leaving the law.
Funny story. I actually had dinner with Zach once. He didn't even wear a watch. But I heard he was just like kind of like scouting me out.
Yeah, he's trying to be low key.
So I think that's a good way to segue into what you're kind of doing now. Tell us how you got into Fleming, and you're the COO now.
Absolutely.
So he's not just a watch photographer.
Yep.
He's one of two people that are like running Fleming.
Yeah.
I have a funny joke for COO.
Tell the joke.
So when I go to like Watches and Wonders, they'll ask, me and my sisters, we'll go to the show together, and they'll be like, "So what do you do in the business? What do you do in the business?" And then I'll be like, "Oh, I'm the COO." My sister would be, "I'm the COO." The other sister, "I'm the COO." Like, how do you have 3 COOs in your company? And we're like all simultaneously, we're the child of the owner. That's why I always think of COO. Yeah, but James, please tell us.
He's not the child of the owner.
No, he is the actual COO.
Chief Operating Officer.
Yeah. So I mean, in some sense, I had spent a lot of time, kind of learning photography, getting into the industry. At some point, I was flying to Switzerland for photography assignments for Hodinkee without telling anyone at work. And
at the stressful.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we would have appointments. We'd wake up in the morning in Switzerland. We have appointments all day to see people. I would take photos, and then I would spend the night in Switzerland editing the photos, turning them in to Logan. so he could work on the story, and then I would be like getting ready to sleep at like 12, midnight Swiss time, and by that time it was still like 6 p.m. in New York. It was still like business hours for a big law firm. So I would get work emails even though I was on vacation nominally, and then have to work until like 3 a.m. in the morning, and then wake up.
Crazy.
So basically, like, in the beginning, I was a lawyer who was obsessed with watches, and then over the course of like 2021, 2022, when I started getting sucked deeper and deeper into the watch world, it almost got to the point where it felt like watches were my real life, and being a lawyer was like what I did on the side to, pay the bills. Like, it was something my parents could be proud of.
Yeah.
You tell people you're a lawyer in New York, like they actually, they can like mentally classify you.
Yeah.
And it was a very like safe thing. But I mean, it was at some point I realized like watches were where my heart was, as corny as that sounds. And, I was flying to Switzerland, I was meeting watchmakers, and, I had known Ming and, Simone Brett and a few other watchmakers for a bit before that, and had kind of watched them go through their journeys of launching a watch brand. And that sort of gave me the confidence that, hey, like maybe this is something I could also do with my life. And, for a long time, most of this happened in 2022. I would sort of like keep it as an idea in my head, but not really think about it. But among the people I met was Thomas Fleming, who's the founder and CEO of Fleming. We had started talking on Instagram in 2020. This was when I was getting really deep into Instagram. He was also getting into Instagram. We were both like learning watch photography at the time, and we just became friends. And he told me, oh, I'm working on a watch brand. And I would tell him, oh, that's really cool, blah, blah, blah. Just another one of those people I would talk to on Instagram. And then I remember sometime in 2021, this was when I was like, starting to like, get into photography for brands and whatever. He was like, oh, I really like your photos. Whenever my watch is ready, can I hire you to do the launch photography? And I told him, yeah, of course, it'd be an honor for me. And then fast forward another year, 2022, this was when I was like really, really getting into the watch photography, watch industry side of things. We had another mutual friend of ours who took a trip to Las Vegas and was like, hey, do you guys want to come to Las Vegas with me? And so this was when I was still like working from home for 4 days a week, right? And so I would like I spent like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the office, and then Wednesday night I got on a plane to Las Vegas, and I spent the rest of the week in Vegas. Didn't tell anyone at work. I hope my old boss isn't listening. And that was the first time I met Thomas.
At my last firm, my coworker was really into brewing beer, and he had a degree in brewing beer, but like he was a lawyer, and he would leave work at like 5:30.
Yeah.
Go and brew beer until 11 o'clock.
Wow.
Brewery.
Yeah.
And I was like,
That's dedication.
Great. That's dedication. So it just reminded me of that situation.
Right.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah. No. I was when we were like working from home, I would literally like be on Zooms, and like I would turn my camera off, mute my mic, go over to my dining table and just take watch photos.
Wow.
And one time I remember I shoot with flashes, and after you press the shutter, the flashes always beep to tell you that they're like recharged. Yeah. And one time I forgot to mute myself, and someone on the call was like, why are there beeping sounds in the background? And I was like, oh, fuck.
Just be like, oh, my fire detectors are having issues. Yeah. But it's really rhythmic.
Anyway, so ended up in Vegas. This was like April 2022. First time I met Thomas. Up until then, I had no idea what he looked like, where he was from, how old he was. And we ended up, us and a couple friends, we ended up spending 4 days together in Las Vegas. I got along really well with Thomas, and at the end of the trip, I remember he was like, I wouldn't feel right asking you this because my watch isn't ready yet, and I know I haven't done anything yet, but I just wanted to let you know, if you ever get tired of being a lawyer, I think you should quit and come work with me. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And at the time, I still wasn't like ready yet. And I was like, oh, thank you. Like, that's really nice. I appreciate that. And just sort of, but not really, like kind of just forgot about it. And throughout the rest of the year, I just got like deeper and deeper into the watch world. You know, I was spending, like, I would be out at watch events until like, you know, midnight or whatever, and then have to come home, and then, you know, have to wake up the next morning and go to work at my law firm. Whereas, you know, like it was a weird feeling, because, like, you know, especially when you're a lawyer at a big law firm, like it's very, it wouldn't, you know, like
soul sucking.
Yeah, kind of like, and it was like I realized, like, it was at watch events, hanging out with watch people, talking with watchmakers, people were really passionate about their craft. Like, that was when I felt the most like energized.
Just for some like context, at my first law firm out of law school, is a big law firm, I was told that 9 p.m. through midnight was not Craig time.
Did you still be working, basically?
Yeah. It was not like my free time. It was not Craig time. So,
wow.
And then like one summer I worked 6 weeks straight with no days off until 9 p.m. every single day, including weekends. So just context of like what like you deal with at big firms.
So random. Can you guys still practice? Do you have to like renew your license?
I have my license. My license is technically still active. If you're not practicing, all you have to do is pay a fee every 2 years.
I see.
But if you are practicing, then you have to do what are called continuing legal education classes. So you have to take like a certain number of hours of continuing education every 2 years in order to keep your license if you're practicing.
Wow.
But anyway, like 2022, I started working as a lawyer in 2011, which is, you know, kind of unfathomable that I was a lawyer for that long, but it was 11 years. And toward the end of that year, I like had a bunch of like epiphanies. One is that, like, you know, like being in the watch world kind of felt like, you know, that was where my passion was. And at the beginning, I never thought I'd be a lawyer for 11 years. Honestly, like I thought I would spend a few years, pay my loans off, and then figure out what I really wanted to do with my life, which is not an uncommon kind of thing when you go into being a lawyer. And at some point I realized like that, like I've been a lawyer for 11 years, and that sort of, like, one, I'm not getting any younger, and two, there was something, Tony Trena, who was also a former lawyer, who left his job around like the same time. He wrote, he had like a newsletter that he started during COVID while he was a lawyer called Rescapement. And when he decided to leave that job to go work for Hodinkee, he wrote like a final edition of Rescapement. And he had the line in there that was like, you know, as a lawyer, I mostly could have imagined what the next 15 years of my life could look like. Meanwhile, Hodinkee didn't even exist 15 years ago. And I realized that unless you make an active decision to do something crazy with your life, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember his exact words, then it's very easy to kind of like, you know, get carried along by inertia. And I wanted to stop getting kind of just like getting, you know, floating through life, doing something that, you know, it was fine enough. It was a secure job, paid well, whatever. And, you know, do something crazy, which is like leave all that behind and join a startup watch brand. And one way to look at it was like, yes, you know, I'm leaving a lot of like security, whatever behind. And the other way of looking at it, which was sort of what pushed me over the edge, was so few people have the opportunity to take something that they're really passionate about and make it their life. And here was that opportunity in front of me. And in my mind, like, you know, like so many people, especially in New York, like lawyers are a dime a dozen, right? Like I like thought to myself, like, so many people have lived the exact life that I'm living, but not very many people have lived the life of, you know, like an American kind of like quitting their job, leaving their everything behind to start a watch brand. And when I thought about it like that, it almost felt stupid not to try it. And when I like came to that realization, I went on WhatsApp. And this was October 2022, and I sent Thomas a message, and I was like, hey, remember that time you told me if I ever got sick of my day job, I could quit and come work with you? is that offer still open?
Wow.
And I remember he replied within like 5 minutes. I was like, yeah, of course it is.
Wow.
And that weekend he came to New York. We spent like 3 days together. He, told me about everything he was working on, explained the vision to me. And then at the end of that 3 days, I told him, all right, I'll do it. And it took me like another month and a half to actually give notice at my job. But once I finally left, I've never looked back.
I remember. So James and I became friends. I was probably like 2021.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's been like almost 4 years
Wow.
or something like that. And we were both lawyers at the time. And then James tells me he's leaving the law, and he knows that I wanted to as well. I feel like you leaving and actually doing it gave me a little bit of courage to do it as well, because it's obviously the stability is not the same. But so okay, tell us about Fleming. You showed us the watches that you've released already. We're gonna have B-roll up, but what are kind of the next steps? What are you working on? What can you tell us about the brand?
So the first thing I'll say about the brand is that it's something that even probably 10 years ago, it just would not exist. The watch industry, up until I would say Max Buser came around and founded MB&F, there just was not this sort of like template for so-called outsiders, which Max worked at JLC, Harry Winston. He was part of the industry, but he was a designer, not a watchmaker, not an engineer, and he really blazed the trail for like a lot of people to come, where he showed you can be someone who has good ideas and a vision and a very strong will, and you can get, even if you're not a watchmaker, you can get the best watchmakers in Switzerland, the best engineers, the best, case makers, crystal makers, whatever, and put them all together, and you can make something really, really cool, and you can make a brand out of that. And that was sort of, the modern kind of blueprint for a lot of brands to come. And then, fast forward 10, 15 years, you have brands like Ming that launched in 2017.
Ren in
2024, where like Ming is someone who he was sort of tangential to the industry in that he loved watches, and had participated as a collector in watch forums going back 20 years to when he was a teenager, but was in many ways an outsider, right? He's not a watchmaker. He had never worked properly for a watch brand or in the industry. He's to this day based in Malaysia, which is very far from Switzerland. And, in the next 8 years to come, he's made an enormously successful, inventive, fresh brand that's won at this point, multiple GPHG awards. That's sort of opened the door for both on the brand side, people like me, like Thomas, who, we're Americans, we're collectors, very passionate about watches, but, otherwise outsiders to the industry. That's one side of the equation. And then you have the supplier side of the equation where, maybe 20 years ago, if you're a random guy in New York emailing a Swiss supplier in English, there was like zero chance you would get a reply. Even today, you might not get a reply. But you have companies like Short Etienne, which was responsible for a lot of Ming's production. They saw that you can actually partner with people from not necessarily from Switzerland or not necessarily from the industry who just have really good ideas, and it would be great for both the brand and for the supplier. Yeah. And that's sort of evolved, that was a big evolution, I would say, in the past, decade or so, where now you have now the door is open for people like us, people like Craig, to really, people who just have an idea because, we're collectors, we've seen a lot of watches, I photographed a lot of watches, I have my ideas of what I like in a watch, what my ideal watch is, and maybe 20, if this were 20 years ago, I'd have to like find a watch out there that as best as I could kind of embody the things I care about. And now I have the possibility of actually trying to make my ideal watch. And that's really the idea behind the brand. And you can make a successful brand at any price point, right? That's what I always think. Like it's independent of what Ming always talks about is they try to deliver value no matter what price point they're at. And they're sort of, again, a blueprint for this because their first watch was $900. They were very successful,
Wow.
sold out very quickly.
Yeah.
They now make watches that are, $45,000, $50,000, and they're just as successful. And what they're focused on is not necessarily price point, but value. Is what they're offering at $45,000 worth, does it deliver value vis-a-vis other $45,000 watches on the market? And you can make a watch at any price point that delivers value.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's so much important where, there's this sort of notion out there like, if you're a new brand without a recognized name, which is a challenge in an industry that's dominated by history and all that. True. But I don't subscribe to the belief that if you're a new brand, you kind of have to work your way up, right? It's you often get the comment like if there's a new brand that launches at like a price point above like $5,000, like I can get X watch for the same amount of money. They need to prove themselves first, but that's really not how watchmaking works, right? Like with certain exceptions, like Ming sort of like worked their way up. But it's not a, if your vision, which, as a collector, I've gravitated toward more high-end independent watches with nice finishing, just by personal preference. It's what I sort of value most, like I don't know anything about, like there are very popular genres of watches that I just don't wear, don't know much about, but I love independent watches. And if we're gonna launch a brand and make our own watches, we have to produce something that we know and that we like and that we would wear ourselves as collectors. And for us, that happened to be, like high-end independent watches with nice finishing. And that's, we'll sort of, our first watch was around 50,000. We'll go below that. We'll go above that. But I don't, I think that's sort of, I'd rather get the shock out of the way first. Like,
True.
They're a new brand launching a $50,000 watch. Like, that's going to be a challenge no matter what, right? I'd rather kind of put our foot in the ground and say like, hey, like we're here to make very nice things first, rather than, sort of launching with like, say like a $5,000 watch where, once, if our ultimate vision is going to be to make $50,000 watches, we're going to face that skepticism anyway, right?
I think there's also a misconception that only the like legacy brands that have huge manufacturing can make like high quality watches for like more affordable prices. When you don't understand, they have potentially thousands of employees. They have all these marketing costs,
retail markups.
Retail markups. So a lot of times, the brands that are independent brands and then like on the less expensive side, micro brands can offer as much value, if not more, because of the way that the businesses are leaner than the brand. So like, I just want to get that misconception out of people's heads. I love most of these legacy brands and they create great watches, but that's not to say that there's not a lot of value in, a Fleming or a Berneron or, like brands that are
Ren.
like, or Ren or Christopher Ward. I mean, Christopher Ward's getting very big now, or like a Baltic and things like that. Because of, they don't have as many employees. A lot of times it's more social media dependent.
There's
There's not a lot of marketing.
It's like 3 people making decisions.
And if you're not in a store, you don't need to have, a 5 times markup on your watch. So let's get that out of the way so people like understand that these watches can have as much value, if not more, than some of
and like the way James is talking about his journey from lawyer full-time. I didn't even know that you were working still as a lawyer until recently. Actually, I thought you were like doing more photography before that.
James is actually running back to his law job after that.
But like from lawyer to doing photography, it just feels like everything kind of worked out in the right timing for you too, because like the way we look at Instagram now is so different than we did 3 years ago because the algorithm changed and now they don't prioritize photos. So like maybe James has taken a step back from taking photos. I'm sure you still take a lot, but now you're able to focus on working with a brand. I couldn't think of a better way of your trajectory in the industry.
But also during the period when like it was like the rise of independent watchmaking, right?
Yeah, like everything is like happening at the right time, and then you just had to make the decision to do it at the same time too, which is so amazing, like so commendable. And then the question I have too is like, it sounds like Ming has become like a someone you look up to, like almost like a mentor. Did you guys ever make a funny joke like, hey, I'm working for Fleming and you're Ming?
Absolutely. I that was like the first joke I made when so now we have this thing called the AHA, which is the Alternative Horological Alliance, which is composed of 3 brands at the moment: Ming, us, and Josh Shapiro. We're all friends who have known each other for a while. We all like working with each other. We're all in our own way outsiders to the industry, and we all have sort of different things we bring and different visions of watchmaking. But we at some point we realized like, hey, like there are a lot of challenges we face that are common to all 3 of our brands that we can sort of mitigate if we work together. Anyway, the first joke I made was if we ever do a collab, it can just be like Fleming with like parentheses around the Ming.
Definitely should be something. Fleming. So what can you tell us? Like where are you going next? When's the next release coming out? Because you're sold out now, so I'm sure that people want to know when they can be on the lookout. And can you give any insight into what it might look like?
So we have a couple models that we're working on currently that we are targeting for release this year and next. The first is sort of the Mark II version of the Series 1, where we had the launch edition and 3 materials and different dials. We've retweaked the dials a bit. We might keep some of the materials or use new ones, and it'll be sort of the version 2 of the launch edition, which we're limited to just the launch versions.
Series 1 Mark II, not Series 2. Okay.
Exactly. Series 1 Mark II. We might revise the
1S, like the Apple.
Exactly.
Right. We might revise the nomenclature, but then the other is we actually are very lucky to be working with a tennis player who's his name is Casper Ruud, who when we signed him, we had no physical prototype. We had CAD drawings and sort of a dream, and he was number 2 in the world, and he decided to turn down a bunch of big brands and sign with us, which is really cool. And that was and so we. Part of the discussions with him, we're going to work on a watch with you. It'll be like sort of a co-branded model where, he'll have input because he's a top tennis player, and he will be able to wear the watch while he's playing. But it's going to have a lot of the same DNA from the Series 1, sort of the dressy edition, where, the idea is to have sort of the ultimate everyday watch where you can wear it. It's going to be more sporty than the launch editions, but not like all the way where it wouldn't look out of place when you're wearing a suit, going to a dinner, or wearing on a tennis court. And the idea is that it would be suitable for all those things. And so we're working with our case maker, who's as far as I'm concerned, the best case maker in Switzerland. They're modifying the engineering of the case to increase the shock resistance of the movement. Our movement partners at Chronode are also revising the engineering of the movement to make it as shock resistant as possible. We'll see how that turns out, but that's sort of what we're targeting for like the next big release.
Sick.
When can we expect to see more about that.
So I mean, one of the good things, I guess, about being a small brand that's we don't have shareholders right now. We don't have the pressure to kind of like crank things out on a certain schedule. We're targeting this year for both of those releases. Okay. We'll see how things turn out, but one of the things we always told ourselves at the beginning was we're not going to launch something that's not ready. And so if it takes longer, it'll take longer, but we really want something that we're proud of, because it's especially a young brand at a high price point. We can't really we don't want to, and we can't afford to kind of like put something out that's half baked.
And so is Casper's watch, is his going to be like a one of one, and then you'll do a production version, or is it going to be
he's not ready to tell us that.
Sorry, I need to get what I can,
and
right?
You don't know, things might change. If he says something now and then it doesn't actually
maybe it's like a different
true.
Color dial or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be either way.
We just have to wait and see.
I'm just trying to get a little bit more information.
I will say that the movement, when you showed us the Fleming watch when you were passing around, I was like, this looks exactly the kind of watch James would like to photograph, because when you look inside, it's like a relatively thin. It wears great on the wrist, but then you look inside and there's like so much depth and layers going underneath.
And the logo is like in the
the ratchet wheels.
And it's the first time I noticed there's a power reserve on the back.
There is,
and I was like, oh, it's really cool. Like,
don't ask James about the problem he had. Yeah, James and I were commiserating because we're at totally different price points. Right now, we're under 1,000, and they're at 50,000, and we have a lot of the same issues and the same with like just manufacturing. There are always
and I would say this is a discussion I have a lot with other brands or even collectors, where the fundamental principles behind how a mechanical watch works have been the same for centuries, right? They're well understood, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to make something, especially when you're trying to like remix certain things or using novel parts, novel materials. It's still hard to make something mechanical when all the parts are so tiny, all the tolerances are so tight, and that's an ongoing challenge for every brand, regardless of price point, to make something that works reliably, and which is sort of kind of what I as someone trying to make watches, it's often can be the source of headaches, but at the same time it's cool in the sense that it's not something that's industrial, right? It's not something that's perfected. There's still some human element, whether the parts are made by humans or not, where not everything is just off the line perfect, works perfectly. And that's part of the challenge, but I think is also part of the charm that people don't buy like vintage watches, for example, to keep perfect time, or there's something about watches beyond just keeping time that draws us to them, and I think that's cool. But that said, obviously we want our watches to work perfectly, so we've taken some extra time to make sure we get that right.
Awesome. Wow. Well, thank you, James. This has been very insightful from both your background and obviously what you taught us about photography, and then the brand.
I think you've inspired a bunch of people to quit their jobs, grab a camera, and start a brand today.
When it doesn't work out, you can blame this guy over here.
I'm about to quit.
I make no guarantees.
I'm follow James on this journey.
Can we still film here?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
If you had to pick one watch under $50,000, what would you choose? And because we have James as a guest today, he's going to decide.
For me, I picked the Ming 2001 Series 3 in rose gold. You have a chronograph movement from Agenor, rose gold case, and a dial that's literally filled with lume in hundreds of individual cavities, which is crazy.
Wow. I've seen that.
Okay, I'll go next. I'd pick and I'm not being influenced by your guesses, or maybe I am just a little bit, but it's a really good watch. The Fleming Series 1? Is that what it is? That's the Fleming Series 1 in Tantalum. Okay, so it's 45.5 Swiss francs, which Right now, it's kind of straddling the line of $50,000, but I think, you have an aventurine dial. Obviously, the tantalum case is really cool, really hard to work with. To me, it kind of can be a little bit sporty, but it's also like very classic and dressy. And, I've had a chance to review these watches. They are just next level, and maybe one day I'll be able to afford one. So, Fleming for me.
I'm going to go with the Lange 1815 up down in white gold. I think that is one of my favorite watches at the price, even though that's like $35,000, saving a little money. No, it's 1815 up down, different watch. Yeah.
The datograph.
I'll show you a picture of it. But I just think it's stunning, and I've always wanted it. Once I have $35,000 to spend on a watch, I'll be doing something like that. But so classic.
Oh shit! I still haven't thought of my answer this whole time. I was like listening to each of one of yours. I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great.
What Grand Seiko or Omega?
I'm no more Grand Seiko, no more Omega. Yeah, because I keep talking. It's not even like I talk about Grand Seiko that much. It's just that every clip we have, I happen to be talking about them. So I'm gonna go a totally different direction. I'm gonna go with the Breguet Tradition Skeleton. I forgot the reference number, but I love the white gold version. It's a 40mm case. You can see the front. It's all open work, and it's still automatic. So you flip it over. There's a cool anchor-shaped rotor. I think that's one of the most beautiful watches I've seen recently, and I'm really excited for what Breguet is gonna bring this year.